Kyle Roberts was nobody. A forgotten kid from a rundown council estate with no future. But by the age of 23, he had built a multi-million-pound drug empire that stretched from London's darkest streets all the way to the violent cartel strongholds of Sinaloa. How did a boy, invisible to the system, become one of the most powerful and elusive criminal masterminds Britain has ever seen? This is the story no one saw coming. Kyle Roberts was born in 2002 in a grey, crumbling council estate in South London. His world was a maze of broken lifts, flickering hallway lights, and neighbors who didn't ask questions. His mother, often absent or high, floated in and out of his life like a shadow. His father was a name on a birth certificate, nothing more. From the outside, Kyle looked like any other kid growing up in poverty, quiet, scrawny, always wearing the same jacket. But even then, something about him was different. While other children played football or messed about in the stairwells, Kyle watched. He watched everything. By the time he was 10, Kyle had learned that no one was coming to save him. Teachers labeled him as slow. Social workers stopped visiting after a few missed appointments. In school, he barely spoke. He didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't cry. He just existed. That made him invisible, and invisibility had its advantages. He could move through places unnoticed. He listened to older kids bragging about phones they'd snatched or packages they'd delivered. He heard names, routes, hiding spots. Every detail was stored, even if no one noticed him standing in the corner. At home, life was survival. There were nights when the electricity would cut out, and Kyle would lie in the dark, tracing shapes in the damp patches on the ceiling. Hunger wasn't just a feeling, it was a fact of life. The fridge was usually empty, the cupboards bare. But Kyle didn't complain. Complaining never changed anything. He started to wander the estate more, slipping into corner shops, lingering near takeaway bins, learning how to stretch a pound for days. Some nights he stayed out until the sun came up, not because he wanted to, but because home wasn't any better. By 13, Kyle had become a ghost in his own life. Ignored, forgotten, left to drift. But behind that silence, something was forming. A plan. He saw how people moved in desperation. He watched how street-level dealers carried themselves, how they feared certain names and how power changed people. Kyle didn't want to be feared. He wanted to be respected, and he understood something early on. Power didn't come from shouting, threatening, or fighting. Real power came from knowledge and patience. While everyone else was running, Kyle was waiting. And in that forgotten corner of South London, a boy the world had written off was already learning how to take it all. At 16, Kyle Roberts had no GCSEs, no future, and no family stability to speak of. But what he did have was time and an uncanny ability to blend into any environment without drawing attention. That year, he began spending more time near the car park behind a betting shop known for being a quiet meeting spot for low-level dealers. Most kids his age tried to impress or join in. Kyle didn't. He just offered to help. No questions asked. Whether it was running a bag across the estate or keeping watch for a drop, he made himself useful, and more importantly, he didn't talk. The local gang who controlled the area, the Grit, didn't notice him at first. He was just another stray kid hovering around, probably trying to make a quick buck. But Kyle was different. He turned up on time, never pocketed product, never asked what was in the packages. Within months, they started using him more regularly. He wasn't earning much, 20 here, 50 tal there. But it wasn't about the money. Kyle was watching how everything worked. He saw how the runners were treated like pawns, sent to dangerous areas with no backup. He noticed how money moved, how burners were cycled, how packages were rerouted when police were active. He understood risk better than most of the older boys, and he avoided it like poison. He also learned who mattered and who didn't. The loudest men usually had the shortest careers. The real players sat in silence, deep in back rooms, making decisions that shaped the flow of drugs across entire boroughs. Kyle noticed the small details: who paid in advance, who got credit, who handled the encryption keys for the safe phones. He learned the slang, the codes, the hand signals. But he didn't adopt them. He kept his speech clear, his face neutral. He wanted to be forgettable, and for the most part, At night, Kyle would lie awake in his freezing bedroom, mentally mapping out the routes, the players, the weak points. He wasn't interested in turf, he was interested in systems. How they moved products, laundered profits, handled betrayals. It became his obsession. He started reading online forums, diving into news stories about international smuggling rings, studying how they worked and why they failed. By the time he turned 17, Kyle knew more about the drug trade than most mid-level gangsters in his area. But still, he waited. No one suspected the quiet boy sweeping floors and running errands was preparing to build something far bigger than they could imagine. When Kyle turned 18, he disappeared from the streets almost overnight. No one thought much of it. Kids like him came and went all the time, burned out, locked up, were just swallowed by the system. But Kyle wasn't lost. He had simply moved on to a different battlefield. One without street corners, knives, or flashing blue lights. He was now operating behind a laptop screen, deep in the shadows of the dark web, where identities were fluid and trust was currency. It began with a second-hand laptop and a borrowed Wi-Fi signal from a neighbor. Kyle taught himself everything: coding, encryption, blockchain transactions. He didn't just skim the surface of the internet, he burrowed into its darkest corners, learning how anonymous marketplaces operated, how vendors built reputations, and how substances were disguised, packaged and shipped through international postal systems. He saw that the streets were small-time. Online, the real money was moving silently in Bitcoin and Monero, with no turf wars, no gunshots, just orders and deliveries. Under the alias Kingfall, Kyle opened a vendor account on a lesser-known darknet market. At first he offered only counterfeit Xanax and Valium, bought in bulk from Eastern European suppliers he'd contacted through encrypted messaging boards. The pills looked real enough to pass casual inspection, and the profit margins were massive. He designed clean, minimal packaging, vacuum-sealed, labeled innocently, and posted from random locations using drop boxes around London. His delivery success rate was nearly perfect. What set him apart wasn't the product, it was the way he operated. He responded to every customer with polite, professional updates. If a parcel went missing, he refunded immediately. Within weeks, Kingfall was climbing the rankings. Other vendors mocked him for being too formal, too corporate. But Kyle didn't care. He wasn't building a side hustle. He was building a brand. By the end of the first year, Kyle had moved over 30,000 pills. His earnings, nearly £250,000, sat safely in crypto wallets, split across multiple currencies and stored with meticulous backups. He had no criminal record, no known gang ties, and no reason for the police to ever look in his direction. On paper, he was unemployed. In reality, he was running one of the most efficient illegal pharmaceutical operations in the UK, all without touching a street corner. Kyle had figured it out. Real power didn't wear a mask or carry a weapon. Real power logged in, got to work, and logged off untouched, unknown, and unstoppable. Kyle's success on the dark web had caught the attention of more than just buyers. By early 23, he received a message through an encrypted platform from a contact calling himself Midas. It was simple: a supplier with access to higher-grade products, faster shipping routes, and global reach. Kyle didn't respond immediately. He spent days digging through forum posts, tracing language patterns, and verifying Midas's reputation through other vendors. Once satisfied, he opened the line. That decision would transform everything. Midas was based in mainland Europe but had direct links to Mexico, specifically Sinaloa. The name meant little to most people in London, but Kyle knew what it represented: one of the most dangerous and powerful drug cartels in the world. Midas wasn't offering street-level product. He was offering raw fentanyl, uncut cocaine and synthetic opioids, sourced directly from cartel manufacturers. The prices were low, the purity was high, and the supply was endless. Rather than send obvious parcels of drugs, the new system operated through coded shipments. Kyle began importing industrial fabric dye, herbal supplements, and audio equipment, all legitimate-looking cargo, carefully hidden within legal exports. He used shell companies registered in the Cayman Islands, Cyprus, and Panama to handle the paperwork. Containers passed through ports in Rotterdam and Hamburg before landing in the UK. Nothing looked suspicious. Everything was covered by customs documentation. To the authorities, it was just trade. To Kyle, it was gold. He scaled rapidly. The pills were replaced by powders and liquids. Kyle started supplying mid-level distributors across London, Birmingham and Liverpool, none of whom ever met him in person. His orders were sealed in thick vacuum packs, stored temporarily in rented lockers, and collected by runners who were never told where the product originated. He created a network built entirely on distance. No direct links, no conversations, just codes, times and locations. Kyle had evolved. He was no longer just an online dealer, he was a broker between continents. The operation was clean, systematic and precise. Payments were handled through tumblers that laundered the crypto through dozens of accounts. His reputation on the dark web shifted from impressive to untouchable. Even Midas reportedly began referring to him with a new name, the Architect. In just 6 months, Kyle Roberts had gone from selling counterfeit pills in London to importing pure fentanyl from Cartel labs in Sinaloa. And yet, not a single law enforcement agency had his name, his face, or the faintest idea who was truly behind Britain's newest and most dangerous supply chain. To outsiders, House of Smoke looked like just another trendy shisha lounge, tucked away on a busy Brixton high street. It had everything you'd expect: velvet booths, mood lighting, ambient music, and a menu filled with exotic flavors. Young professionals came to unwind. Students took selfies in front of the neon signs. Even local influencers praised it online for its chill vibes. But what no one saw was that the lounge wasn't built for customers, it was built for control. Kyle Roberts had funded the entire project through a shell company, registered to a fake Eastern European investor. The paperwork was flawless. The lounge passed every health inspection, every licensing requirement. Staff were hired through an agency that specialized in temporary hospitality workers, meaning few stayed long enough to notice anything unusual. What they didn't know was that the real work happened behind the scenes. Above the lounge, in a soundproofed back room behind a fake wall, Kyle set up what he called Command. A row of custom-built laptops, satellite phones, encrypted servers, and burner routers formed the brain of his operation. It was there that shipments were tracked, payments were processed, and routes were adjusted in real time. Surveillance footage from stash houses and drop points streamed in on silent monitors. Kyle watched everything, always 2 steps ahead. But he didn't do it alone. Kyle had built a team that didn't resemble any traditional gang structure. He recruited a former university dropout with a talent for coding, an ex-postal worker who knew how to manipulate delivery routes, and a disgraced accountant with a taste for crypto. Each one was loyal, not because they feared him, but because they were paid better than anywhere else, and treated like professionals. Kyle didn't rule with violence, he ruled with efficiency. No drugs were stored in the lounge. No deals took place on site. It was clean by design. The building had deliberate blind spots in its CCTV system, escape routes through back alleys, and a panic protocol that could wipe all data in under 30 seconds. To the authorities, it was a harmless cash business. To Kyle, it was his nerve center. From that quiet lounge in Brixton, Kyle was now running a multi-million-pound network, stretching across Europe and into Mexico. Every message sent, every drop scheduled, every payment logged, it all passed through House of Smoke. It wasn't just a front, it was his fortress, and no one, a younger operator, named Reese, who had risen quickly through the ranks, saw the northern crew as a direct challenge to their dominance. Without permission, Reese sent 2 couriers to deliver a message. That message ended with a 19-year-old from the Calder Street crew, found beaten and stabbed in a Burnley car park. It wasn't clean, it wasn't quiet, and it was definitely not part of Kyle's plan. The killing lit a fuse. In retaliation, 3 of Kyle's distributors in the Northwest were attacked. One was shot in the leg, another had their flat ransacked. Suddenly, Kyle's name, previously whispered only in dark corners, was being thrown around by gang members who didn't even know what he looked like. Social media lit up with rumors. Journalists started asking questions. Police increased surveillance on known associates. Kyle was furious, but silent. He didn't issue punishments or purge his crew. Instead, he pulled out completely from Manchester, Liverpool, and Leeds. He liquidated assets, cancelled drops, and cut off anyone who had even a whisper of exposure. To the outside world it looked like retreat, but to Kyle it was containment. However, the damage was done. That single death, careless, emotional, and avoidable, had placed Kyle's network in the crosshairs. Authorities didn't know his name yet, but they were watching. Patterns were being pieced together. A turf war no one had asked for had created noise, and in Kyle's world, noise was dangerous. From that moment on, the silence that had protected him began to crack, and for the first time, Kyle wasn't fully in control. The death of Daniel Keyes in March 2025 marked the turning point no one saw coming. Daniel wasn't a street dealer or a gang member. He was an unassuming accountant living in a modest flat in South London, with no criminal record and a quiet life. But behind closed doors, Daniel was Kyle Roberts's closest confidant, the man who kept the books, cleaned the money, and managed transactions with near-perfect precision. His overdose was sudden, shocking, and suspicious. At first, the police treated Daniel's death like any other overdose. But forensic analysis revealed traces of a rare synthetic opioid, far purer and deadlier than what usually circulated in London streets. His bank records raised further questions. Large cash withdrawals, sudden spikes in cryptocurrency trades, and transfers to shell companies in obscure tax havens didn't fit the profile of a struggling accountant. Something was off. As investigators dug deeper, they uncovered a hidden world of encrypted files on Daniel's laptop, password-protected folders, coded spreadsheets, and messages in cryptic language. Though many files were damaged or erased, forensic experts managed to salvage fragments that hinted at a vast, meticulously organized network of drug distribution across the UK, with links reaching as far as Mexico. The documents contained references to shipment codes, drop locations, and payment cycles, all arranged like clockwork. Daniel's death wasn't an accident. It was a warning. Someone inside the operation had turned on him or wanted him silenced. The police theorized that internal betrayal had triggered the turf war months earlier and that Daniel's murder was meant to stop him from revealing too much. It was a dangerous game of chess, and Daniel was the first casualty. This revelation transformed the investigation. For the first time, authorities realized they weren't chasing random street dealers or fragmented gangs. They were up against a sophisticated criminal empire that spanned continents. Daniel's laptop became the key to cracking the operation wide open, offering a glimpse into the scale and complexity of Kyle's network. But Kyle Roberts remained elusive. He had left no trace, no fingerprints, no direct connections. His empire was built on layers of secrecy and deception, and Daniel's death was just the beginning of the unraveling. The police were now on a race against time to expose the full extent of the drug empire before more lives were lost and before Kyle disappeared forever. Daniel Keyes's laptop became the most valuable and dangerous piece of evidence the police had ever encountered. Behind layers of encryption, investigators discovered a complex digital map of Kyle Roberts's empire. The files contained coded spreadsheets, transaction logs, and encrypted messages that formed a web spanning the UK and reaching all the way to Mexico. Each piece of data was a puzzle, and piecing it together required specialists who had never dealt with anything quite so sophisticated. The spreadsheets listed dozens of drop points scattered across London, Manchester, Liverpool, and smaller towns. Each linked a unique code. Every shipment was assigned a number, and every number corresponded to a container or package moving through legitimate-seeming freight channels. The shipments were disguised as everyday goods, fabrics, electronics, spices. The police realized these weren't random smuggling attempts. They were carefully planned operations designed to evade customs and law enforcement. Payment records showed the use of cryptocurrency tumblers services that mix and obscure transactions to prevent tracing. Funds flowed from dozens of anonymous wallets into one central account, then moved again through offshore shell companies, before appearing as clean, legitimate money. The scale was staggering. Kyle's empire wasn't just a gang, it was a multinational corporation, complete with logistics, finance, and security divisions. Decrypting the messages revealed coded language, words that seemed ordinary but had specific criminal meanings. Smoke referred to shipments of fentanyl, garden supplies meant cash drops. Blue skies indicated cleared routes through customs. The deeper the police dug, the more they uncovered betrayals within the network. Trusted lieutenants had been siphoning money, setting up rival operations, and leaking information to law enforcement. The network was beginning to collapse from within. One of the most chilling discoveries was a list of names connected to overdoses and violent incidents across the country. Victims whose deaths were indirectly linked to Kyle's drugs. This evidence shifted the investigation's focus from petty crime to a major public health crisis. Authorities began collaborating with international agencies, recognizing that Kyle's operation was not just about drugs but about global trafficking and organized crime. Despite this breakthrough, Kyle Roberts himself remained a ghost. Every lead pointed to dead ends or false identities. His ability to control such a vast and complex network without ever appearing in person baffled investigators. The laptop exposed the skeleton of the empire, but the man who built it was still out of reach, watching from the shadows as his world began to crumble. As the police investigation into Kyle Roberts's empire intensified, so did the internal chaos within the network. The once tight-knit team began to fracture under pressure. The leaks and betrayals uncovered in Daniel's files revealed that trust was scarce, and paranoia was spreading like wildfire. Kyle's lieutenants, once loyal and efficient, started turning on each other to save themselves. Each arrest, each raid, pushed more of them to cooperate with law enforcement or vanish into the underworld. One of the most unexpected twists came when a mid-level courier named Aisha, previously overlooked by the police, stepped forward as an informant. She wasn't a hardened criminal, just a young woman caught up in the operation, afraid and desperate to escape the cycle of violence. Aisha revealed how Kyle's system worked in practice: coded shipments moving through legitimate channels, the use of burner phones and encrypted apps, and the ruthless way anyone who threatened the network was dealt with, usually without direct involvement from Kyle himself. Her testimony helped authorities locate several stash houses and intercept shipments. But it also highlighted something more disturbing. Kyle had created a web so vast and compartmentalized that even many of his closest associates had no idea of the full picture. The empire was designed to protect him by keeping people in the dark, a criminal fortress built on secrecy and deception. Despite the growing number of arrests and seizures, Kyle remained elusive. The police identified a handful of front companies tied to the operation, but none led directly to him. His digital footprint was a ghost trail, wiped clean with sophisticated tools and proxies. Investigators believed he had contingency plans for every scenario, a network of safe houses, false identities, and financial buffers that allowed him to disappear at the slightest hint of danger. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating in the criminal underworld that Kyle was preparing to move the operation even further underground into more dangerous territory, including direct cartel involvement and smuggling routes through the Caribbean and Africa. If true, this would mark a new phase in his empire, one far harder to track or dismantle. As law enforcement closed in on his network, Kyle's ability to stay one step ahead became almost legendary. The boy from the Council Estates had become a criminal mastermind whose reach spanned continents and whose capture remained one of the most elusive goals in recent British criminal history. The final chapter of Kyle Roberts' story began not with a dramatic shootout or a high-speed chase, but with a quiet, unexpected death in a small flat on the outskirts of London. A low-level dealer connected to Kyle's network was found dead, poisoned, the victim of a lethal cocktail of drugs that appeared to have come from within the operation itself. This death sparked a wave of fear and suspicion that rippled through the ranks. Whispers of betrayal turned into accusations. Loyalties crumbled. The police seized the moment. Using information from the dealer's phone and recent contacts, they pieced together a chain of messages that hinted at a fracture inside Kyle's empire. Someone was feeding information to the authorities. The hunt intensified. Surveillance increased. Safe houses were raided. But Kyle was nowhere to be found. The truth, slowly uncovered through a combination of digital forensics, informant testimonies, and intercepted shipments, reveal a brutal internal power struggle. Several of Kyle's closest allies had attempted to seize control, betraying him to gain their own advantage. The coded shipments had become compromised, and encrypted channels were leaking secrets. The empire was imploding from within. But Kyle, true to his reputation as a criminal genius, had anticipated this possibility. He vanished without a trace, leaving behind a meticulously planned exit strategy. Offshore accounts had been emptied weeks before, crypto wallets wiped clean, and all ties to physical assets severed. The House of Smoke Lounge was quietly shuttered, his team disbanded, either arrested, fleeing, or forced underground. The authorities never caught Kyle Roberts. Despite the mounting evidence, despite the network dismantled piece by piece, he remained a ghost. His real name was never confirmed, his face never published. For many he became a legend, a symbol of how a nobody from the Council Estates could outsmart entire law enforcement agencies and international cartels alike. Yet the damage he caused was very real. Hundreds of lives were lost or ruined by the drugs he trafficked. Communities were terrorized by violence sparked in the wake of his empire's collapse. The global nature of his network exposed weaknesses in policing and customs that would take years to address. In the end, Kyle Roberts disappeared into the shadows he had mastered, leaving behind a chilling legacy, a reminder that in the world of drugs and crime, power often belongs to those who never need to show a gun, but instead build empires from silence.